inshallah, we'll continue our journey with this great surah, chapter, Quran. Again, it's one of the longest, second only to surah, to the chapter of Al-Baqarah. Very full of guidance, like every part of the Quran, full of guidance and inspiration and direction, working on our hearts and on our minds and shaping up the individuals, the family, the community, society at large, even going all the way to humanity, on a very different foundations and principles compared to what was there before Islam, especially in that part of the world. You will, again, the focus on the family is very, very much understood, because that's the building block of the society. And any deficiency in the family will only be magnified in the society and will only be transmitted from one generation to another. And that's why Islam went, unlike in other parts of the Quran, it went into the details of how to manage and run this institution, and what are the rights and the limits, and how to deal with different situations and how to protect it, because that's where the most important thing that is happening in the society. I know people, they value a lot of industry and businesses, they consider them critical and sectors, but the most important industry, if you will, is really what takes place at home in the family, which is the human, the individual born and raised and shaped and then presented to the society, either as a effective and productive element, or as someone who may cause harm and distraction and cost the society a lot. So no wonder why the family has, when it comes to the family, Quran went into the details. So building the family, managing it, protecting it, dealing with troubleshooting. There is even troubleshooting because it's so critical. And there are some proactive and preventive measures, like we're going to talk about them today. And there are also some remedy on how to handle the situation. And then, of course, in other parts of the Quran also talks even about if worse comes to worse and divorce became unavoidable, there is also a decent way to do it. Unfortunately, once again, Muslims are nowhere close to these guidance and these directions and these nowhere close. Families are built very haphazardly. Relationship between man and woman became so confused and so messy, because we are, in many Muslim societies, they are trying to combine different approaches or cultures or paradigm, and then they ended up with something that is really make no sense. And a little bit of the Arab culture, a little bit of the Western culture, a little bit of Islam, and then you mix these up, and you end up with something that is very, very chaotic and very messy. Because every paradigm, it has some consistency when coherence. Without it, and when you mix and match, you end up with something that is very weird and very dysfunctional, actually. And if it was not for the pride of Muslims in general, and Arabs maybe in particular, that they don't share the problems that happens at home, and that's normal, but we probably do overdo it, and make things on the surface look good, if it was not for that, we would realize how bad the situation is. Yeah. And you can tell, unfortunately, in the Muslim societies, also the rate of divorce is very high. And if you consider the family that is in between, it's not really family, they're not married, they're not divorced, they are somewhere in between. I mean, the number can go very high, and you end up probably with a small percentage that have a harmonious, functional family that was built on a very strong foundation and doing its job. And I think that would be a minority, and with no exaggeration, maybe a small minority. And that's for a reason. Unfortunately, we're people who do not read, and we don't we do not educate ourselves about spousal relationship, about parenting, about, I mean, these are two different, creations completely. I mean, they are equal, they are this, but they are very different. Yeah. And in our societies, or in Muslim community and society, a lot of men deal with women as like they deal with men, and they end up messing things up. So in addition to the lack of sexual education and lack of education about the other gender, so we ended up with something, as I said, the more I read Quran, I say, where these people are from this teaching. Quran made it very clear that there is no competition, there is no fight, there is no battle at home. These are just people complementing each other and are meant, or are instructed, to come together to build that successful, effective institution called family, on harmony, on affection, on love, on respect, on etc. And then find a way and build some sort of system so that things will function, and then do everything right, like what Islam wants us to do in everything. Is just whenever you do something, try to perfect it. You are a spouse, you have to read about this role, because that's a big role and big responsibility. You are a parent, you decide to become parent, then you have to read about this and educate yourself. And let's stop this forming and running families very haphazardly and raising children very haphazardly. Alhamdulillah, wallah, every now and then children they are raised haphazardly and they come okay, but that's not the majority, and that's very unfortunate. So we're continuing with I think we stopped at الذين آمنوا لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل. It's amazing, this Quran, how in the same verse or in verses next to each other, jump from working inside you as an individual, and then to the community and to the family, and then to the humanity at large, and then comes back to, and they are all mixed together in a very eloquent way and very nice way. That's why I say that it's really a joy and a pleasure to read the Quran if we do it right. If we do it, if we read it with reflection and contemplation and seeking guidance, it's really becomes really pleasure. It's not like something that you have to do, like the prayers, or something that you're doing it just to get some rewards. And it is amazing how the verses ended, the last verses. We are in we're gonna start today 29. They ended with, after all, guidance and restriction, and you do this and you don't do that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَكُمْ وَيَهْدِيَكُمْ سُنَّنَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ وَيَتُوبَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ وَاللَّهُ يُرِيدُ أَنْ يَتُوبَ عَلَيْكُمْ وَيُرِيدُ الَّذِينَ يَتَّبِعُونَ الشَّهَوَاتِ أَنْ تَمِيلُوا مَيْلًا عَظِيمًا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَنْ يُخَفِّفَ عَنْكُمْ وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Amazing, these three verses. This is the last thing you expect. Usually do's and don'ts are received as a burden, restriction. And here comes, and Quran tells us that these are mercy and these are love, just to lighten your burden and your life. Um, he wishes to make his laws clear to you. That's why he's telling you, he want to show you his wisdom so that you understand. And then because the first one finishes with Alim Hakim, the all-knowing and the all-wise. So this all-knowing and all-wise creator is showing you his wisdom and telling you why this is good for you. I mean, there is nothing that Allah needs from us. I mean, it's anything he asks us to do, it's in our own best interest in this life and in the hereafter. Whether we see it or not, we appreciate it or not, it doesn't matter. So Allah wishes to make his laws clear to you, to show you the wisdom behind this, and guide you to the righteous way of those who were before you. These rules and guidance are tested, and they were shown that they're successful. I mean, those who followed them, they succeeded, and those who violated them, they failed. He wishes to turn towards you in mercy. He is all-knowing and all-wise, and he's asking you to do things and to refrain from doing other things. That's mercy, yes. That's what Allah is telling us. He wishes to turn towards you, but those who follow their lusts want you to go far astray. Because if you think about it, all the guidance, all the divine guidance is a middle course between two extremes. ويريد الذين يتبعون الشهوات أن تميلوا ميلا عظيما. Everyone will take you. When you lose that middle course, you end up like a pendulum between people pushing you to this extreme, and then the reaction will go to the other extreme, and then that will never stop. So, and here also there is an important message. It is either the divine guidance or it is followed your lusts. I mean, again, I keep saying this, that divine guidance does not cancel the role of our minds and intellect. It just enlightens it. But you don't follow the divine guidance, you're going to do as you wish, and then the result is disaster for the individual, for the family, for the community, and for the society. And no law on earth, no matter how great it is, no matter how perfect or how detailed it is, will replace that self-restraint that the divine guidance will do. Nothing will replace that. No matter how, there will be always loopholes, there will be always good lawyers that can work around it, and then you fix it, and then you find another workaround. And there is, yes, we need that. That's needed, of course, that's not, but there is, things will not work based only on laws. There should be that self-restraint. So after that, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. This is new lesson now. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts by calling, of course, خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Allah, with those rules, wants to lighten your burden, because he knows that you're weak. And he knows that if without the divine guidance, you will harm yourself. You will do, maybe you will figure it out, but after a lot of harm is done. By the way, humanity was able to come to many things that are in the divine guidance. But after what? After so much waste of time and lives and money and wars, etc., to come to some of the things that were given. So you can understand why Allah says, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَنْ يُخَفِّفَ عَنْكُمْ. Allah wants to lighten your burden by giving you the rules and then explaining them to you, so that you know the wisdom behind it, so that you don't have to go through that trial and error and have to do a lot of damage and harm, and then just to figure it out. So there are people who figure it out, because the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are not, humanity or people can reach them on their own. The rules that govern this universe, I mean, humanity came to the point that justice is the foundation of prosperity. But that's essential in the divine guidance. But where we came after. So, and then tolerance, and then, I mean, what, human dignity, as opposed to slavery and racism and religious wars and all of this. I mean, it took so much waste of time and lives, etc., to realize things that are there. I mean, when Quran says that humanity is one family and they were made to be different so that they can know and understand each other. من نفس الذي اتقوا ربكم الذي ينسوا اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم الذي خلقكم إن أكرمكم عند الله وكذلك جعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا, so that we made you into nations and tribes so that you get to know each other. And then no compulsion in religion. That's it. This is the way Allah created people. So there is no point in any nations or anybody fighting anybody for beliefs. That's out. So one verse. So يريد الله أن يخفف عنكم وخلق الإنسان ضعيفا. That Allah knows that the human is weak, and if they are left without divine guidance, they end up in this trial and error. They follow their lusts, and they cause a lot of harm and damage to themselves and to each other. And then maybe they can figure it out, or they can figure out some part of this wisdom, but after a lot of unnecessary sacrifices and waste. And يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل إلا أن تكون تجارة عن تراض منكم ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما ومن يفعل ذلك عدوانا وظلما فسوف نصليه نارا وكان ذلك على الله يسيرا. We went from the family, jumped to the society now. You who believe, do not wrongfully consume each other's wealth, but trade by mutual consent. That's the exception. Do not kill each other, for Allah is merciful to you. If any of you does these things out of hostility and injustice, we shall make him suffer fire. This is easy for Allah. It's amazing. I mean, putting the abuse of wealth and money unjustly and lives next to each other. That's how important it is. And if you think about it, one will lead to the other. I mean, when people take each other's wealth, whether individuals in the same society or even the same family, or nations from one another, a lot of time that leads to a lot of hatred and crimes or wars. So لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل, we'll leave the exception. And then ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم. And you do not take each other's wealth wrongfully, and do not kill each other. Actually, تقتلوا أنفسكم, it's even stronger. Do not kill yourselves. When you kill one another, as if you're killing yourself, which is very, I mean, Islam, remember, elevates this killing thing, life, the sanctity of life. Like if someone kills one individual, like he killed all humanity. من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا. And then if one saves one life, as if saved the lives of all humanity. So here, ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم. Even though it is meant that you don't kill each other, it's not like don't commit suicide, but killing each other was expressed as if you're killing yourself, because you're a member of the same family, large family called humanity. So ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما. Allah is telling you not to do this because out of His mercy, because this is bad for you. I mean, this is إن الله كان بكم رحيما. Again, يريد الله أن يخفف عنكم ويتوب عليكم ويهديكم ويبين لكم and now إن الله كان بكم رحيما. يعني all of this is mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as opposed again to the other path, which is very destructive for people. By the way, for those who abuse and those who are abused, and for those who accept and tolerate this abuse, because one of the characteristic of Islam is that yes, there is a law, but it makes you, creates the self-restraint within you, and then puts the community responsible for this, so that it's not like policing each other, but creating an environment and the norm that will make it harder for people to commit these crimes. So we went now to the transaction and interaction within the society. So telling you, if you do this, if you don't deal with one another fairly, and the only thing that was excluded was trade with mutual consent. Any other thing is an abuse of money. If you do this, this is the outcome. This is the consequences. First, this leads to hatred and crimes and killing and etc. And then, if this is not enough for you, this comes the punishment on the day of judgment. ومن يفعل ذلك عدوانا وظلما فسوف نصليه نارا وكان ذلك على الله يسيرا. So there are consequences in this life, and they're very serious, very severe, and there are consequences in the hereafter. And it starts by saying يا الذين آمنوا, and then in the middle إن الله كان بكم رحيم. يعني the package, any true believer will not think twice. Start by calling you يا أيها الذين آمنوا. That's like and I have your attention, wake up call, just to remember who you are. And there are implications for that belief. So belief that results in this kind of character and manners. Do not abuse each other's wealth or steal or anything. I mean, bribery, stealing, anything that is unfair or unjust, abusing the need of people, whatever. إلا أن تكون تجارة ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم إن الله كان بكم رحيما ومن يفعل ذلك عدوانا وظلما فسوف نصليه نارا. يعني if these are not enough for you, then you are I mean, nothing else will work. I mean, if you are told that this has severe consequences in this life, for you, for your family, for the society, everywhere, and we know these hatred thing, when they start, they never stop. Yeah, they can expand and they can go from one generation to another. Yeah. ومن يفعل ذلك عدوانا وظلما فسوف نصليه نارا وكان ذلك على الله يسيرا. إن تجتنبوا كبائر ما تنهون عنه نكفر عنكم سيئاتكم وندخلكم مدخلا كريما. This is, by the way, actually even the verse about wealth can really be considered foundational verses. يعني like a very general principle. يعني لا تأكلوا أموالكم بينكم بالباطل ولا تقتلوا أنفسكم. I don't know why people leave these foundational verses and then go and focus on some verses that are truly, clearly contextual, يعني clearly contextual, and they are applies only in a certain context. يعني إن تجتنبوا كبائر ما تنهون عنه نكفر عنكم سيئاتكم وندخلكم مدخلا كريما. But if you avoid the great sins you have been forbidden, we shall wipe out your minor misdeeds and let you in through the entrance of honor. وندخلكم مدخلا كريما. What is this? There is a condition: you avoid major sins, great sins. The question is, what are they? What are these? And if you avoid them, we will forgive the minor ones. Some people refer to saying of the Prophet or hadith to list to develop a short list of kabair, as if you avoid these, you're good. That's not the proper attitude with the believer, by the way, with Allah, of the believer with Allah. That's not proper attitude. That's not the way to deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to say, okay, what are the ones that I need to avoid so that I can feel free to do the rest. Yani, that's not appropriate. Yeah. I'm leaning more towards the explanation that these hadith were mentioned in different contexts to highlight different major sins, but none of them is comprehensive or covers the whole thing. And even if you make them combined, maybe they don't cover the whole thing. So the whole idea here, rather than listing, this is what Quran is directing us. Rather than knowing what are those, this list so that they can avoid it, Quran is telling you basically to try to avoid all sins. As long you try, because tajtanibu, I mean, there is, you try. You're trying your best. As long you're trying, and you're trying hard, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with the proper intention, you can count on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first of all, to guide you and protect you. And second is to forgive you if you make mistakes. So the idea is not to know which one are the major, so that are forbidden, and which one are the minor, so that we are okay with them. No, that's not the way to understand this. The way to understand it is to try. That's why you are praying in every rak'ah and many times a day for Allah to guide you. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. And إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. And we seek your help, and we seek your help, and then guide us. Why? Because we need that. But no matter what we do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in a way that we are not angels. At the end of the day, there are weakness and shortcomings, and there are temptations of life, etc. And we are going to trip. Yeah, we're going to make mistakes. The whole idea is that preventive measures, like the healthy body is not the body that doesn't become sick. Healthy body is the body that fights back, has a good immune system. So that's what is needed here. It's that you are taking precautions and preventive measures and avoiding every sin, because you are in the business of trying to do things that are the more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are in competition. That's what you are expected to be. You are expected to be in competition, competing, competing to be the best and to get the closest to Allah and to do the most beloved things to Allah. That's your intention, and that's your resolve and determination. But in that path, you will make a mistake, and sometimes you lose your way, and then you come back with a proper tawbah. So that's the idea. That's how we understand it. Not to go and try to find what is the list of these major sins so that they can avoid them, so that I'm okay with the rest. No, of course they should take priority in avoiding them, whether it is false testimony, whether it is killing, whether it is lying, whether it is fornication, whether there are a number of saying of the Prophet ﷺ, but also you can get them in the Quran. Anytime you find the Quran talks about cursing category of people who do certain things, or say these people are going to end up in hellfire, etc., that's one, you know that's a major sin. That's one way to know that it is a major sin. وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبْنَ وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا. This is can be understood in general terms, or it can be, and then first was in general terms, and then it was made specific for the case of man and women, and we're gonna, inshallah, elaborate on this. Do not covet what Allah has given to some of you more than others. It's very important. Very important that you direct your attention not to what people have. It's always you place your needs before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You thank Him for what He has given you, and you ask Him for your needs. That's the proper attitude that brings you closer to Allah. That's the best approach. The other approach leads to disaster, is to start thinking why this person has more or what, etc. That can lead to envy and can lead to hatred, can lead to you belittling the bounties and favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the list goes on. Yeah. So do not covet what Allah has given to some of you more than others. That's in general. And then man and woman, and that's something that requires some elaboration. Men have the portion or they have earned, and women their portion, whether it is what they earned by work or what they earned by inheritance. You should rather ask Allah for some of His bounty. So ask, He has full knowledge of everything. Now, I talked about one in general. General concept is always to focus on what you have, to be grateful, because what you have is a lot. And at the end of the day, it's all favors from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's not like, it's something that, don't say that I worked hard for it. Yes, you need to work hard for it. It's not going to come to you while sleeping. But there are people who work hard. There are other people who work hard and maybe harder than you, and maybe did not get what you got. So it's very important to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not to wait until you lose one of those great bounties to appreciate them. Yeah. Just look at someone who has lost their eyesight. They don't see anymore. And that will tell you what it means to be able to see. And then applies to be healthy, applies to so many things. Yeah. So many things. You wake up in the morning, you are alive again, and you're healthy, and you have your provision for the day, and you have a job, and you have a family, and you have all of this are favors from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you should be very grateful for. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like if you don't ask Him. And unlike people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not like if you don't ask Him. يعني وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب ادعوني أستجب لكم. ادعوني يعني ask. Allah is telling us to ask Him. ادعوني أستجب. So be generous in your dua. Please choose the best times and make supplications and ask Allah for everything you want. But never expect things from people or want to have what people have. That's even worse. Or actually want to have like them. That's okay. Ask from Allah, but not to get what they already have. That becomes an envy and hasad. So now men and women. So that principle applies to men and women, and I wish humanity has applied this. I wish that man remained man and women remain women. I wish we didn't get into this mix up of seeing them as if one is better than the other and everyone is trying to imitate the other or be like the other. I wish that they stayed equal but different, and did not get, because nowadays women has lost a lot of their what do you call feminism? Not feminism, must be something else. Yani unutha, female nature, whatever. And men also. It's we're having the situation that is very weird. And then, of course, the battle, the war. Its power struggle became, its power struggle, and that's very bad. So that's the principle. No one wants to have what other has. So there is general principle that applies to wealth, applies to everything. Allah may not have given you something that He gave others, but at the end of the day, people will be held accountable for what they have been given. And the more you have, the greater is your responsibility, and the greater will be your reckoning. Because we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not deal the same way with a person who has billions or millions or hundreds of thousands, and with someone who deals in the thousands. Then everyone will have their own way to be held accountable. According لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا ما أتاه. Allah does not ask people to do anything more than what He has given them. The resources that He gave them. So at the end of the day, you have to have full trust in Allah's justice, that absolute justice is done. Allah knows everything. And maybe He did not give you something that is not good for you. وعسى أن تكرهوا شيئا ويجعل الله فيه خيرا كثيرا وعسى أن تحبوا شيئا وهو شر لكم. You may like something that it's not good for you. Good for you when you take the package, this life and the hereafter together. You still need to ask. But if Allah does not give you something that you're asking for, it's not this, maybe give you something better. Or maybe that particular thing is not good for you. So that's a general principle. Focus on yourself, be grateful for what you have been given, and ask for your needs, and don't worry about the others. That applies to people in general, applies to man and woman. And again, I wish this principle was maintained and preserved, because man and woman, nobody is better than the other. Allah created them in a different way for different functions and for different things, but they have equal rights and equal duties and equal everything. And that's what is going to be explained later. But gave man certain qualities and gave them certain responsibility, and gave women certain qualities and certain responsibility, and they're meant to complement each other. And Quran calls them, they are halves. تقوا الناس تقربوا إذا خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها. That there are two halves of the same thing. It's complement each other. It's not, there is no fight. There is no one is superior than the other, so that one will feel inferior and want to be like the other. There is no such thing whatsoever. المؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر. They have the same mission. They complement each other. The family is built on love and affection and tranquility and peace of mind and complementarity. It's not no fight, no war, no superiority, nothing. Again, it's almost all humanity maybe missed that target or that delicate balance, and we ended up in scenarios that are not really good, even though it didn't have to. Yes, women was abused everywhere in the name of Islam, among Muslim societies, and even this society. In Muslim, women were abused throughout history until now. Until now, there is a problem of equal pay, and the voting issue was resolved only a few decades ago. And yes, but to fix that, and needs to be fixed, the reaction did not have to go to any other extreme, and did not have to turn this into a war or a battle or competition, or one category wishes what other category had. It's للرجال نصيب مما اكتسبوا وللنساء نصيب ولا تتمنوا ما فضل الله به بعضكم على بعض. Man is not superior. There are different qualities and different characteristics and different features so that they can complement each other. And if we don't realize that and we get into the business of trying to be like one another or fight for power or for struggle, etc., then we miss the point here. وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. We said this, that ask Allah for what you need. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا, to make people comfortable. Always this Alim and Hakim, the all-knowing and the all-wise, is to make people comfortable, accepting the divine guidance. Even Allah, who is the creator, when he tells us something, first he explains it, and second gives us some incentive to do it. I wish we do that even with our children and with each other. I wish that when you want to tell someone, try to explain it and explain the reason. Even if your child, explain the reasons behind it. Even your child when they are young, try to get into the business of convincing them and explaining to them. If Allah is doing that with us, explaining to them why this is good and why this is the right thing to do, and then give them incentive. That's what Quran is telling us. And if Allah is doing this with his creation, then people definitely have to do this with one another, including, again, very little children. We still have to try to get them into the business of understanding and being convinced rather than being forced to do things. وَلِكُلٍّ جَعَلْنَا مَوَالِيَ مِمَّا تَرَكَ الْوَالِدَانِ وَالْأَقْرَبُونَ وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نَصِيبَهُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدًا. This is specifying that there used to be arrangements before Islam of people inheriting each other even though they are not cousins. They're not relatives. There are more than one. We don't need to get into the details, but at least one of them, the one that the Prophet has, actually there are ones before Islam and there is one before this verse, and the verse in Surah Al-Anfal. Rasul established that brotherhood between the immigrant and the resident of Medina, Muhajirin and Ansar, and to the point they were inheriting each other. And this verse and other verses, they stopped all inheritance except through these proper channels that were explained in this verse, which is only blood relationship that were detailed here. So first of all, limiting the inheritance to the cousins and relatives and blood relationships, and then the contracts that were made already, like Quran did this everywhere. Always does not do things retroactively. Whatever was done, keep it, maintain it, honor it, honor those contracts. Where is it? This is 33. We have appointed heirs for everything that parents and close relatives leave behind. So we established the rules for inheritance. So there is nothing outside this, including those to whom you have pledged your hands. So give them their share. Allah is witness to everything. They say they give your hands in marriage. I don't think it needs to be restricted to marriage. It applies to everything that was done, any form or formula of inheritance outside the ones that were specified in this chapter and these verses. All of those are gone, except if there were already some pending contracts and signed, then these need to be honored. وَالَّذِينَ عَقَدَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ فَآتُوهُمْ نصيبهم إن الله كان على كل شيء شهيدا. So إن الله كان بكل شيء عليما, all knowing. إن الله كان على كل شيء شهيدا. Allah is witness to everything. It's always that spiritual awakening, and that to make you really receptive to this, and then never think of this as a burden. Always think of it as, I love Allah, I'm worshiping Him, I'm trying to do everything to meet the divine expectations and to be better than, and to compete and do more than others and be better than others. So I'm looking for guidance, and then Quran is revealed to show me how I can do that. That's the attitude of the companions, by the way. The attitude of the companions was people who made commitment to pursue the good pleasure of Allah, no matter what it takes, whatever it takes. And then they were seeking guidance, and Quran was revealed to guide them. When that commitment is no longer there among Muslims nowadays, they can read the Quran, they can listen to lectures, they can listen to, and will have very little effect on them. Why? Because the reception is not good, and it's not well oriented. So no matter how good the signal is, it's not going to click. That's not the attitude of the companions. The attitude of the companions, they made the full commitment to pursue the good pleasure of Allah, whatever it takes. And then they were looking for directions. And Quran was revealed. And when the Prophet says something, or Quran is revealed, they are so eager to receive it, not reluctant or hesitant or give it a second thought or any of that. الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن فاعظوهن واهجرهن في المضاجع واضربوهن فإن أطعنكم فلا تبغوا عليهن سبيلا إن الله كان عليا كبيرا وإن خفتم شقاق بينهما فابعثوا حكما من أهله وحكما من أهلها إن يريد إصلاحا يوفق الله بينهما إن الله كان عليما خبيرا. Amazing verses of prevention, how this family should be prevented or protected from being dissolved and from destruction, and how, if preventive measures are not working, what should be done. It's amazing. It shows you how in Islam, in Quran, divorce is really taken as the last resort and as something that is really bad, because everything was done to avoid it. All measures and preventive measures and etc. Why? Because it has huge implications on the spouses, on the children, on the family, on the two families, on the society. It is something that is, and it has to be really appreciated and taken very seriously and avoided. And one way to avoid it is to establish the family on solid ground to begin with, because most of the divorces are the result of the wrong inception of the family. The family was not built on strong foundations. So husband should take full care of their wives. قوامون, this is a very critical word and controversial, and was misused, abused, misunderstood, you name it. Should take full care of their wives with the bounties Allah has given to some more than others, and with what they spend out of their own money. Righteous wives are devout and guard what Allah would have them guard in their husband's absence. If you fear high-handedness from your wives, remind them of the teachings of Allah. Then ignore them when you go to bed, then hit them. If they obey you, you have no right to act against them. Allah is most high and great. If you believers fear that a couple may break up That's the next measure. Now we went beyond prevention. It's not working and things are deteriorating. So if we, I mean, at that point, there is no point at that junction. There is no point in those preventive measures. You move to the appoint one arbiter from his family and one from hers. Then if the couple want to put things right, Allah will bring about reconciliation between them. He is all-knowing and all-aware. These are very, very loaded verses, if you will. And again, like many other directions, are not implemented or are abused or misused. الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. Keep in mind that this came after the verses that says that they are equal. الرجال نصيب مما اكتسبوا والنساء نصيب مما اكتسبن. يوصيكم الله في أولاد. I mean, it's after explaining the rights and come and say this institution, like every institution, this is something that we accept here. This is something that we accept always. But when it comes to the family, we have sometimes issues with it. This is an institution that has a huge job and very delicate, which is to be the solid building block of the society and to raise children, which is the most critical institution in the society. We don't accept any other institution to be run without director or somebody responsible or somebody in charge. But when it comes to the family, we want it to be like that. It just doesn't work. This may not look very appropriate nowadays because of the general norms, etc. But that's what the Creator is telling us. And one of the reasons why we have a problem with this, or actually several reasons. One, this concept was abused by men in the name of Islam, in the name of being qawam or in charge. They became dictators and oppressors and abused it. So that was one major factor. The second is, in many Muslim societies, we don't understand complementarity. That even if somebody is a director, it doesn't mean the other is subordinate or slave or doesn't have rights, or it doesn't mean anything. These are different jobs or different responsibility, and people complement each other. It's hard to realize because in most Muslim societies, responsibility or leadership was associated with dictatorship. So we don't probably realize we don't appreciate the fact that actually, if you think about it, bigger responsibility, it's not a favor. If you put it in the Islamic paradigm, in this life and in the hereafter, the more money you have, the bigger is your responsibility. The more responsibility you have, the more is difficult is your job. So it's not really a favor. And it's not meant to be dictatorship. We're talking about an institution that is built on love and affection. That the ideal situation, spouses are striving to make each other happy. من آياته أن خلق لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا لتسكنوا إليها وجعل بينكم مودة ورحمة. The house and family is built on affection and mercy, and they're meant to be to comfort one another, and peace of mind and tranquility. So normally all of these measures are not needed, and we're talking about only when things do not work. It's like when you take a medicine that you don't like, when you go to surgery that you don't like to do, etc. But that's to avoid or prevent something bigger, which is the destruction of the family, which is the fact that the family is being run haphazardly. So, and of course, there is no one size fits all. We're talking about nowadays, unlike in that society at that time, women, much higher educations. Actually, nowadays, in many cases, even in Muslim community, I think girls are more successful in school, and they get jobs and they make as much money or more or less, or things have changed, and that will be reflected on this, because we're talking in a society where this religion is the first one that gave women the right to even have a property and to inherit and to etc. So we're talking, and there was of course no education, there was nothing. So it doesn't mean that the roles will be changed, but it means adjustments can and should be made because the context became very different nowadays. But still, this is an institution that has to make, first of all, its role is more critical than any other. We don't accept a school to be without a principal or without director or somebody in charge. We don't accept anything to just even small store or small business or small anything. And you come to the family and you say, and the other thing is, these are two people. We don't even cannot apply majority. It's not like 3 or 5 or 7, otherwise it would be easier, be majority rule. So this is two people, so that's out. This idea of majority is out. So there should be a formula, there should be something. And here is the creator who knows man and woman and who created them, is giving us this formula and is telling us to take the high moral ground, which is إن الله كان عليا كبيرا. Even though these measures may not look very, very good or very fathomable, but at the end of the day, this is an institution that has to be functional and has to be protected, and the alternatives are very bad. The alternative is very bad, which is the dissolution of this institution and then throwing children to the society without being taken care of, etc. And we know the implications. So that's, in that context, it has to be understood. It's not in any other context. And then talking about فالصالحات قانتات حافظات للغيب ما حفظ الله. Some scholars, they are the Quran is so precise when it comes to family, as we have seen last time, how those prisoners of war, they call them your girls, they didn't call them slaves, and then say they ask for the permission when you want to marry them, ask for the permission of their family, didn't say their masters or their owners or whatever, and then give them the dowry to them, not to the, these are the nuances that when you reflect on them, you can appreciate the eloquence of that. So qanitatun is different than ta'i'atun in Arabic. Qanitatun, this is the obeying a person out of love, out of an extreme love, other than obeying a person because you have to or you are forced. So the love that sometimes they call that reaches the level of worship. That's what they but in this context is the obeying or seeking to make the other spouse or your spouse, man and woman, comfortable and etc. out of love, not out of superiority or inferiority or anything. حافظات الله من حفظ الله. Now, واللاتي تخافون نشوزهن. If you start seeing signs of deviation, that this family is going to start taking that path of this being dissolved or destruction, etc., then this family is given 3 measures. Every one of them is stronger than the other, to avoid something that is much worse. Not, again, either abuse nor anything. If you fear high-handedness, nushuz is something that is really somebody, the literal meaning is to stand on a high place or mountain. Is like basically it's a bad attitude, and rebellious attitude that is not justified. There is no reason. It's just like that. تخافون نشوزهن فعظوهن. First thing, say, this is wrong. This is not going to lead anywhere. This is, etc. Remind them of the best interests of the family, the Allah hereafter, etc. And then remind them of the teachings of Allah. Of course, in many cases that should resolve it. I mean, first of all, we should not get there. And then for many cases, true believers, that will be enough for them. And actually, this is not only from man to woman, even woman to man, reminding someone of Allah, his teaching, that should be enough. Then ignore them when you go to bed, and we know how severe this is. Whoever is well educated on this is really, it's a very harsh, very severe. That also, unless something is crazy, that should also take care of it. And then comes to this controversial statement of hitting them. Of course, some people, they took this out of context, and then they feel free to, and they abuse it like they abused the original concept of qawwamuna and etc. If this is put in all the context of the hadith in which the Prophet and his behavior, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam never hit the woman. Yeah. So that's, if this is put in the right context, it will be understood very, very differently from the way many man has abused it, without even going into details. But it's, first of all, it's the step before divorce. It's the step after strong measures did not bring anything, did not help. And then if you put it in the context, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said in a hadith clearly that you shouldn't do it. I mean, you shouldn't hit. So it's not like contradiction with the verse, with the Quran, but everything has to be put in perspective and in context. From my understanding, with the social norm, which is part of the legislation, with the social norm, that last thing nowadays does not apply. This hitting does not apply. We are in a different context. There are laws, and there are different understanding of the physical and the sanctity of the human body, etc. So it's not like we are crossing a verse. We talked about this before. It's like the context is important in Islam. There is no such thing as just applied as is, and we have seen Umar ibn Khattab, after a few years from the death of the Prophet ﷺ, was making ijtihad in things, or contextualizing clear-cut verses just because of the circumstances. And we'll stop here, but we're going to come to this back because that's a very delicate issue. Of course, the situation when it comes to Muslim family is messed up from the beginning, because the whole family is built on very haphazard. No premarital counseling, no, I mean, the steps that are not taken to minimize the surprise and maximize the chance of the family becoming functional. And then raising children, of course, and not educating them oneself about the other gender and spousal relationship, and no sexual education, and no education of raising children, none. So this becomes even not very applicable, because we're talking about something that was messy from the beginning. So we're going to stop here, and we'll come back to this, inshallah, next time.
Hello, Dr. Anush. May I have a question, please?
Yes, sure.
Thank you. The question is perhaps not directly related to this lecture, but perhaps to so many other lectures also. If you please drill into the two important attributes of Allah, which are the words of Ahad and Wahid. How are these to be understood differently? Thank you.
Sure. And inshallah, we'll leave that for now. And I promise you next time, inshallah, we'll elaborate on that. But let's see if there are some questions and comments about the topic itself. First.
Very well.
Sure.
Yeah, I was struck by the parallels between what we were talking about earlier in the session about trying to avoid sin and understanding that that's really impossible in many situations. This is one of the things in a Christian point of view that one of the insights that Martin Luther, the great reformer, came across, the idea that poor Martin Luther, the confessor of poor Martin Luther, who had to hear Martin Luther going on and on about all the sins he had committed. And Luther eventually came to the realization that what God wanted from individuals was to strive for God's pleasure, for God's goodness, and that even in that striving, one will fail and will continue to sin. But as long as we continue to strive to follow God's will, that God will forgive us, even in our sinfulness. So it seems that you were speaking in that way, or something very similar to that at the first part of the session when you were talking.
Right. You're right. That's exactly the proper attitude, which is striving to avoid sins altogether and to do the maximum and to do your best, while realizing that you are a human being and you are made imperfect, and you're going to make mistakes, and your faith is in good shape as long as you rebound and you make adjustment quickly and you come back quickly. That's a sign of good faith, not someone who does not commit any sin. That doesn't exist.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
It sounded like you recommend counseling before marriage. And if that is correct, is this going to be enough, or there is other recommendations in those days for a marriage to be successful? Especially, yeah.
I missed the first word.
The first word, it sounded like you recommend, or based on your knowledge, you said they don't even do counseling. So are we recommending counseling, and do you think that this is going to be it's going to be enough, or there is more other measurements that people need to take in order to get to know each other and help each other to get to know each other better before they get married or after somehow, so they can understand how serious marriage is, to have a marriage, to be successful in their marriage and have a family and have a strong family?
Very good question. As you know, in health, prevention is more important than cure. 1 ounce of prevention is worth tons of cure. So same thing for marriage. All preventive measures should be taken, and they do not guarantee success, but they minimize or maximize the chance of success, minimize the risk of failure. On top of them comes the fact that to make sure that both are mature enough to make that decision, and they settled, basically they decided on what they want to do in life, and preferably, of course, ideally, they both embraced the divine mission or Islam as a mission, So they have already one common purpose and common goal and common mission, shared mission that can make huge difference. At least there is level of maturity that, and maturity is not related to age, can be at different ages, but make sure that's happening. One. Second, families, the potential spouses or future spouses and their families should try to make sure early on to make sure that the other side knows everything about their son or about their daughter. I mean, hiding things and showing the good face and talking only about good things, and that has caused a lot of problems, because the common word statement you hear, I was surprised. I didn't know this. You didn't tell me this. You didn't tell me that. You didn't. That's one of the major factors in the failure so the more they expose, they reveal themselves. This is who I am. That's what I like. That's what I don't like. Well, that's what they can tolerate. That's what they cannot tolerate. That's what. There are families that after they get married, one decided to go back home or to do it. We didn't agree on this before. I mean, you cannot make this decision on the run like this. So that can make big difference. Now, the education about the other gender and sexual education, that's a major factor. I mean, without exaggeration, in most Arab/Muslim societies, the major factor, or one of the main factors, if not the main factor, is sexual ignorance that is resulting on family not satisfied, not happy, and not functioning. Yes, it comes out in a different form, because out of pride, and taboo, they don't talk about this. But originally, when the family breaks up and or someone is be honest with you, that's the roots of the problem. So that's important. And then comes the premarital counseling. Premarital counseling is basically to see if there is compatibility, because there are two personalities going to merge, become one entity called family. They may be very good people, very good individuals, but they are just not compatible. They are not, their personality is not compatible. I'm not an expert, but there are people who are expert who can help in this. And all of this is just will not guarantee success. But of course, if it is not done, that's a guaranteed failure. Except if there is by miracle or by the mercy of Allah, things will work somehow. But that's like a lottery, and one in I don't know how many million chance, the chance you have for this to succeed. So taking all these precautions and then keep doing it. Ideally, the two potential or future spouses will develop some sort of master plan and system for the family even before it is built. If that does not happen, at least early on, finish the honeymoon and then just try to build some sort of system and master plan where this whole thing is going, because that's an institution and it should be managed as such. The good thing is it is institution, but it is not based on rules and regulation, but based on love and affection and mutual respect and etc. So that can help. Before having children, reading about that. Husband has to educate themselves about what women go through in that pregnancy and delivery and everything. You're gonna have to be aware and educated. And because many they don't even take the time to read anything. And then both spouses educating themselves about parenting and children. Every phase in the life of the family is different and has to be prepared for it proactively. So they prepare for the marriage before, and they prepare for children before they come, and they always, and then children, they go into phases. Many parents failed in transition. Their children grow up, they go through, they become teenager, and then become young adult, etc. And the parents are still dealing with them like they were dealing with them when they were children. So many, I saw this many cases. It's because they don't read and educate themselves about this important transition so that they know how to handle it. They end up a lot of time, the failure in parenting happens in the transition when the child becomes a teenager. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work because that's the most important thing. That probably the most important decision that you take in your life, and the most important job that you're doing is to be a spouse and be parent. If we take so many years to get a degree just to get a job, to earn living, and that's important, we should do something similar to get to perform that job right. The job that is much more critical.
Nobody has a question. I have a follow-up question or couple. The follow-up question would be, we all have kids who live here, how we should approach them and encourage them that they should try to marry somebody who's Muslim and not to marry somebody that they just met in college. So this is part of the first question. And the other part is, we talked, and you mentioned a lot about like, things has changed those days and women working. Is it necessary to come up in agreement? And I'm fortunate all of my life, we both working, I never looked at it like it's dividing things, but just from crazy things that you hear around, it seems like I should be responsible, or a lot of scholars talk about it. I don't know if it's scholars, but it's more like shuyukh that you hear about around the mosques, that they say hair money should be separated. But we live in a country that it's like, it's very tough for one income and everybody's working. So what is your take on this?
Let's start with the second one. Easier, actually. It's actually, there is no strict rules for this. Everybody's money is their money. If you want to follow strictly the Islamic paradigm, is women money for her, man's money is for the family. Of course, again, things have changed, and it comes down to mutual agreement, whatever people agree on. ولا جناح عليكم فيما تراضيتم به من بعد الفريضة. And that's a general principle in Islam. It's like mutual agreement takes over anything else. There is a minimum, and then beyond that, or below, or more, or higher, whatever you decide to do, that becomes a mutual agreement between husband and wife, whichever way they decide to do it, as long as they don't violate any, whatever works for them. There is no abuse, and تجارة عن تراض منكم, as long it is by mutual consent and agreement, whatever works for the family will be okay. Now, for the first question, there is no easy answer to this. It's if we succeed to raise good Muslim children, Muslim who know Allah, who love Allah, who are very grateful, who have the proper understanding of their faith, who have that devotion and that level of commitment, and they have a high purpose in life. And if you can, anyone can share the last khutbah I had about this yesterday, the khutbah of this Friday, talking about the fact that the Prophet has instilled big dreams in the minds of the companions that keep them very motivated, and etc. So if we manage to do that, everything else will be easy, because themselves, children will be looking to marry someone who can help in that path and in that direction, and they were not going to make it harder for themselves because marriage across faith, across religion, across many things, sometimes it's not wrong, or it's just does not, it decreases the chances of success and increases the potential problems, especially when raising children, etc. So people looking for to maximize compatibility, and religion is essential and faith is essential. And so if we succeed to do that early on, things will be very easy later. Most of the time we don't. And we struggle every step of the way. And many parents are fighting with their children every day and on every issue because there is no foundation. I mean, there is no anchor. There is no foundation that was established. So everything is my opinion versus your opinion, why and why not. And things are not. Prevention is always the best. And if we spend, especially the first child, if any, especially young families who are to be married to men, if we married now or in the future, the more time they spend, especially in the first child, and be patient and take their time and build that personality. I call it building a child, not raising. It's a building. That should be some blueprint in your mind, and you are shaping. It's like a piece of art that you're drawing, that every day you add some touches, and every day you see if there is something missing, if there is something that need to be, that is weak, and there is something. So if they do that, their life becomes very easy with that first child, and with any child afterwards become really very easy. Fortunately, many people, they don't. And you can only do so much if you don't do prevention, you know, like in health. If you don't detect a health problem early on, there is so much you can do to fix it. And the earlier or the more prevention you do with the diet and exercise and checkups and etc., the easier to detect the problem early and fix it.
جزاك الله كل خير دكتور سهيل.
وياكم
إن شاء الله we see you next Sunday at noon.
إن شاء الله. جزاك الله خير.
السلام عليكم.
السلام ورحمة الله.